Welcome to SEN Insights, powered by Rubrik. I'm Paul Clinton, CEO of SEN and your host today. In each episode, we connect with sector leaders and practitioners to discuss the challenges, opportunities, and ideas shaping student experience. Let's get into today's conversation. Today, we're diving into the engine room of the student experience, governance. Our guest today is Michael Connolly, Managing Director of the CPR Group. Michael has spent decades navigating the complexities of boards and committees across the Australian sporting and community landscapes and has been working well with us for years. He's a well-known expert in his field, and today we're moving beyond the compliance checklists. We've invited Michael on to talk about the why behind his work, what drives him, how the sector's evolving, and the human side of leading volunteer-driven organisations. So sit back and enjoy. Welcome again to SEN Insights. So welcome, Michael. Just for the sake of our viewers, introduce yourself. Most of them will know you anyway, but let's do it anyway for those who are new to the pod. And then we'll get underway with some questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here and pleasure to spend time with you. I'm Michael Connolly, and I'm the Managing Director of an organisation called CPR Group. And our purpose is to build community organisations, and particularly student groups and sports clubs, into better businesses. Because we find that there's so much chaos and so much unnecessary wasted time and effort. And it's all because people don't know what they're doing and don't know that, hey, a not-for-profit doesn't mean that it's no profit. And the better that they do, the better that their constituents do. So in the case of a sports club, that's the kids out on the field and the parents who enjoy watching them. And in the case of a student union, that's the students. Like, that's what we want. We want people to experience better.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for the fabulous introduction. Let's start at the beginning, the origin story, motivation, if you like. You've been a prominent voice in governance for decades, and we've been working with you for a good time now. If we wound the clock back to the very beginning, what was the specific light bulb moment or experience that made you realise that governance, of all things, because some people find it dry, was where you wanted to make your mark?
Yeah, look, I've been reflecting on this a little bit because I've been wondering the same thing. Like, how did I land in an area where I'm trying to help the governance of organisations? And I think that was the key. It was never that governance is the thing. Governance wasn't necessarily a word that I was thinking about when I was seeing the waste. I was seeing chaos. And it was always the human impact. It's not necessarily the organisational impact, because I gave up working with clubs and societies and associations years ago. I realised that I need to work with the people, because it's the people who make an impact. So it was just seeing that waste, and then I don't know, maybe it's just part of the way my brain works. I was able to see beyond all of the noise that's going on and the shit fights that are happening, to then dig into that a little bit and say it's actually a problem with systems and a problem with people not understanding their role, not even understanding the structure of an organisation. I went, that's actually, if you can just point to those things and get enough logic in the discussion, we can solve that. But the nature of doing it, and this is where I love the work, is we're not like Dr. Spock or Mr. Data. We are emotional beings. So you've got to be able to connect with your human on a human level, recognizing that we are going to be emotional about the color of the strip that we're wearing, or the logo on the wall behind us. We're going to be emotionally connected to that. And so we have to be able to connect with people in a way that accepts that humans are humans and they're emotionally driven, yet still work to a logical outcome that says these are the things that we need to repair, so that all of those fights or all of those issues that you're having can quietly disappear.
Brilliant. You pinned yourself with your age and your sci-fi love there, Michael. Data and Spock all in one sentence. I love it, but lots of people won't get that, so that was great.
That's Star Trek, by the way.
yeah, absolutely. So people often see governance as a dry world, and like I said, it's not everyone's cup of tea. And compliance and paperwork. When you're sitting with a struggling committee on a Tuesday night, what's the purpose, the soul of the work that keeps you excited and energized?
Yeah, and look, it's the people factor, but I'll pin this down to the moment when somebody goes, oh, like that's the penny dropping. And when you get that moment, then you know that you've touched on something that's now going to connect, because it's really easy to talk in abstract terms, like even words like strategy, compliance, governance, people interpret these in different ways. So
Yeah.
when you get that, look on somebody's face, you know you've nailed it. You know you've landed something where they can connect to it now and say, oh, I get that. I get how that's important. I get how that relates to me. And that's the real big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Um, just a quick aside. I did a pod earlier with a friend, Alan, from the UK. He's a bassist. Now you're a guitarist. So to keep that thread going through these podcasts, who would be your ultimate guitarist, your idol from a guitar
Oh,
perspective?
that
Completely
that
off topic, but we'll come back.
No,
Is
no, it's
from
actually really important. It's really important, and it's an easy one. So it would be easy for me to. All I got to do is look at my guitar collection. I can say, okay, I've got no an embarrassing number of Les Pauls. It was my go-to guitar when I
have
was a kid. I
you?
always wanted one.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now I've got five Les Pauls and a Flying V because of Slash. Because
All
he's
gibbos.
obviously a bit of a god. But yeah, that's just
Oh
those ones.
wow, very
But
nice.
then I'd go, is Clapton an idol? So I've got a couple of Strats. Is
Yeah,
Tommy Emmanuel an idol? Well, Tommy Emmanuel's definitely the world's greatest, so you can't leave him out. So a couple of Tellys. But then I'll go, okay, it must be Eddie Van Halen because I got three EVH guitars. I'm going, no, it's
yeah,
not. I've got a John Petrucci guitar. He's fantastic. Paul Gilbert's a god. Steve Vai, Joe Satriani. And all I'm doing is just thinking about my collection and the
yeah,
embarrassing
yeah,
number of
yeah.
guitars I have.
Collection.
But the answer's really easy, and it's Brian May. Sorry, it's Dr. Sir Brian May from Queen,
Wow.
and I've got a replica of his Red Special. Now, it's him because he's a beautiful human being. Like you look at the
Yep.
social work that he's doing, and he's just amazing. You look at the fact that when I was sitting there in 2014, when New Horizons flew past Pluto, watching the stream from NASA, said, well, he was only Dr. Brian May back then. He hadn't been
Yeah, that's
knighted
right.
yet. Was sitting there at NASA, like having an impact on that. So it's bringing my space nerdness, my music nerdness. But
Yeah,
beyond all of that, he made his own freaking guitar with his dad. So obviously had a great familial relationship. But what gets me about Brian is his intellect. He is the smartest guy that I've ever
yeah,
seen play guitar, and he brings it all to his music. So nobody play like you listen to any Queen album, and there'll be layers and layers and layers of guitar. So I read in a guitar magazine years ago a line you'll never hear Brian May say. Yeah, I think that's enough guitar lines on this track. He
yeah,
always knew how to create this orchestral swell of beauty just with one
yeah.
instrument, just layering it. So yeah, it's his intellect and the fact that he brought all of that to his music, and that he's an all-round wonderful human being.
Love it. Love that. And yeah, they he does break the mold because I'm a big believer that it's hard to do rock well with one guitar. But
Yeah,
they definitely pulled it off. All right, back
yeah.
to the topics then.
Yes.
Okay,
No,
human
that's the
element.
important stuff.
It is important stuff. Human element of governance. You work extensively with volunteers who are often time poor and stressed. How do you balance the need for rigorous professional standards with the reality that these people are trying to do some good for their community as volunteers?
Yeah, look, here I think the mistake is to think that you have to, it's either rigorous or it's realistic. I think that it's the balance in between, and recognizing that we are dealing with volunteers and that the world around us changes. So a typical thing that I'll say about volunteers is that they bring all of the passion and the enthusiasm to their roles, but they forget that they got to run the business side. So I start to talk
Yep.
about things like, what does a business model look like? What is your pricing strategy? And they go, what do you mean by pricing strategy? Well, it can be as simple as knowing our cost base to know and knowing our desired margin to know what we need to charge. But then it's
Yeah.
also the range of things that we sell and how we price them, even the order in which we pitch them. But then the world changes, and people seem to forget about those things, regardless of how much I've tried to beat them into them or explain them into
Yeah.
them. And then we go, well, we've got this cost of living crisis, and you've got an EV on the way in perfect time with fuel
Yes.
skyrocketing.
Yeah.
But we are so reactive to what, in the grand scheme of things, is going to be a small change. Now, I'm not quite old enough to remember the fuel shortages of the 70s, but I've read about them and seen photos of great big American V8 cars lined up along the street just to get enough fuel into their tank to be able to last the week. And now we've
That's
got
right.
that sort of thing happening. But it came and went. And fuel prices went to below $1 in COVID when nobody was driving. So it's all cyclical, but we've got such short memories that we forget that it's cyclical, and we tend to take our eye off the ball. So I still need to be realistic in the way that I teach, and
Yep.
the empathy that I bring when I'm saying you've got to change your pricing model, you've got to be more clever about how you're thinking about your pricing. I've still got to say it, but I've got to deliver it in a way that respects the human element and also respects the fact that people forget that it's a cycle and that we will come out of it and things will be okay again. But if we take our foot off the gas when we're at a high point of chaos in the world like we are now, then when things settle down again, we're going to dip because we would. It's kind of like marketing. If you stop marketing when you've got too much work on, then when that work finishes, you end up with a lull, and you just keep riding the roller coaster. So
Yep.
it's about keeping enough momentum and enough forward motion in what you're doing with the rigor, but
Yep.
delivering it in a way that is sensitive to whatever's going on in the world, but also the fact that we're dealing with volunteers who bring all of the passion but none of the skill. So, especially in student leadership, we've got early 20-year-olds who've never run a business, never had to run a household, never had to balance a significant financial budget with a mortgage included, having to
Yes.
run multi-million-dollar student unions. So they've got the passion, but they don't have the skill. So it's about finding a way to connect with them as a person, which is difficult because it makes it hard to scale when you're talking person to person, but it's the most effective way to do it long term. So it's worth the investment of time that it takes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. So, what would you say is the most common misconception that boards have about their own role that ends up being their biggest hurdle, yeah, on the road to success?
Yeah, look, it's got to be the blurring of the line between what is governance and what is
Yeah,
management or operations. It's
yeah,
they and especially in student leadership, they get so passionate about what they're elected to do that they say, "This is what I need to do. I need to get in and fix everything now," which means that they're stepping on the toes of other leaders. They're not necessarily listening to their constituents well. But they're also stepping on the toes of management and the operations side, and just getting in the way, not realizing that we've got a role in governance, which is to be strategic and to keep our eye on the ball from a business perspective. But then we delegate to the hands of the organization to do the doing, and it's that
yeah.
separation that's really important. Not for a moment do I think that there's perfection, and I don't want
No,
perfection. There will always be permeability of that line, but
that's
it's
right. Because
recognizing.
occasionally it's useful.
Yeah, and sometimes
Yeah,
people are elected with a portfolio, so they need to come down, especially in student
that's right.
leadership. There is okay, I'm elected here, but I'm also paid a stipend or a wage as an employee,
Yeah, yeah,
so I have a job description to deliver. But the line is where the line is permeable. The people in elected positions need to remember to get back up into governance because nobody, you dip down from governance into operations because that's always where urgency lives. If you stay down though, nobody else is dipping up because everyone's happy doing the
that's
doing,
right.
being
That's right.
busy, not necessarily effective
There's
or
no
productive,
glamour at
but
the
busy.
at the top.
Yeah. So but it's not urgent. It's the important
That's
stuff
right.
that's not urgent that is easy to forget. And I often
Yeah,
make it similar to brushing your teeth, easy to do, easy not to do. And if I don't brush my teeth tonight, I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll go, "Oh, I'm a bit ferry," but there's going to be no damage.
yeah,
But if I keep doing it day after day, year after year, my teeth are going to fall out. So it's
that's right.
easy to do, easy not to do. We've got to make sure that we get back and do those things that aren't going to cause a massive impact if we don't do them now. But if we continue not to do them, that's when the proverbial hits the fan, and that's when we're in strife.
Definitely. Moving on then to the evolution in our industry and trends, having watched the landscape change in Australian associations over the years, what would you say is the biggest shift you've seen in the kind of student experience or community club expectations from 10 years ago to today?
10 years ago seems like a very recent time, 2016. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel like that long ago. Like I vividly remember the holiday that I had at the end of 2016. So it doesn't feel
yeah.
like, yeah, it doesn't feel like that long
But
ago.
equally, there's been some massive world events in that time.
Yep. Yep. So it's significant. So I think that the biggest shift in that window has been in the, I'm going to say, customer expectation. So
Hmm?
as a customer, as a recipient of the service, I expect a high level of service. I expect to be
Yeah,
well looked after. And that's because 10 years ago, I would have gone to the shops a lot more than I do now. Everything is, and the stuff I bought online was all eBay. Now it's all Amazon because Jeff made it easier for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And the experience is simple. Yet I still don't get that when I'm signing up to some not-for-profit sports club, for instance. I'm
That's
still
right.
having to fill in 7 different forms, and then I turn up and nobody knows my name. They can't just bring up my customer, all of my customer history. And we should be able to do that. So at least in the student sector, we've seen a shift towards automation where clubs and societies
Mm,
are better managed through tech, where we've got a consistent CRM that runs through all parts of the business. But I think that too many student associations have tried to say, this is the way that we've done it on paper for the last 40 years.
mhm.
Therefore, that's exactly the way we need a system to run. When what they should have done is said, this is the way that we've done it for the last 40 years. The last 40 years are very different from where we are now.
Yeah.
What's the way that the system says that we should do it? And then adjust our operations just slightly to get massive increases in efficiency because that's the way a system's built.
Yeah, it's interesting you raised the evolution and how we've got better in certain areas, notably automation and data. Um, I've got a post going out today on LinkedIn, covering that exact frustration. We are getting better at it, but we still have that situation whereby, because of their risk profile, universities won't share the data with student-led organizations.
Yeah.
And we've got a situation whereby, oh, here's 40% of the staff because we have to give you that now, but we're not going to give you the tools to do that job. So I'm going to be a bit provocative today, but a bit of a frustration, really.
Yeah. And look,
Yeah,
it's provocation like that that I think is going to have an impact. Because if people like you and me don't stir the pot, then it's
yeah,
easy for the large, slow-moving, risk-averse bureaucracies that are universities to keep doing nothing and keep ignoring their own customers. Like
yes,
we should, and this is, talking about why I do the work with student associations. It's because we should have this symbiotic relationship between universities and unions. And look, it's the word union. I realise that a union is
yes,
there to hold the man to account. But put that to the side and say, yes, that needs to happen. But if the universities are doing the right things by students, then they don't need to be held to account. And so
that's
that
right,
should
that's
be
right.
a good
It's
starting
more a
point.
discussion about how can we make things better together.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
For the
yeah,
people
yeah.
that are your customers and our customers.
That's right. Shared customers, totally.
Yeah,
Although,
who'd have thunk
I
it?
mean, there's going back to that comment you made earlier. I smiled to myself because we were having a discussion earlier in the week. They don't even like using the word customer because it goes against the original ethos of, they're educators. They're not
Mm.
service providers. You and I both know differently, but that's for a different day and a different fight.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you're seeing a move forward to more streamlined agile structures. Do you think the traditional model of a 12-person representative board still fits for purpose in 2026, or is it time for a total rethink
If I was
in
to say
student-led?
yes, yeah, if I was to say yes, I think it's absolutely right. I think I'd make your head explode, Paul. I think you and I have spent enough time together to
We've
know
had too
how
many conversations on that. I'm being
how
provocative,
I
obviously.
feel about this. Yeah. So okay, let's start with the number.
So
I
yeah,
think,
just talk about what you're seeing though, because you're doing
yeah,
work
yeah.
with a number of our organisations in this space.
Well, maybe I'll start with the differences that I see between the work that we do in sport, for instance, and the work we do with student-led organisations. In
Yeah.
student-led organisations, I actually think there's more of a place for representation still, but I
Mhm.
think it's about striking the balance. And so the models that we've been setting up with the likes of Western Sydney and the likes of Sunshine Coast and the likes of Griffith Gold Coast say, well, look, we need to protect the business. So when it comes to what I'll call the board, for just to give it a label, that board needs to have the skills to run a multi-million dollar business, and they've got to do it well. We've got to make
Yeah.
sure that they've got the ability to keep the money coming in, manage the money, manage the relationships, make sure we're compliant. We're charity, so we've got to make sure we're meeting charity. So we need to have the right skills in that area. We still need students, and obviously from a legislative perspective, we need that if that is the leadership group to be student led. But when
Yeah.
those students are properly trained, and that's why we've got our out of the ordinary course, so that we are training them to understand their legal obligations and how to run a multi-million dollar business. It's hard to get that across in a 2-day training program, but it's so
Yes.
important that they do. If we want a skills-based board, let's give them the skills. But then we've also got models that can bring in expertise either from the university or from outside, so from just directors or board members who are maybe business leaders or community leaders who can bring in knowledge and skills that then help the student leaders to be able to meet their business obligations. So I think that's where the business side needs to be really skills based. But when
Yeah.
we separate the business side from, let me call it the activism and advocacy side, this is where I think that we still need strong representation. So a representative body where we've got an elected career officer, an elected women's officer, an elected sports officer,
Yeah.
faculty or school representatives, that's where we do want them to bring in their understanding and their knowledge of their
That's right.
particular cohort or their school or whatever it is, so that we make sure we're doing it right. So from a business perspective, we've got all of the legal duties that apply over here, which mean that they can't be representative. They have to represent everyone, and
Yep.
that's important. But when we get here, we do want these leaders to be that bit more provocative and to play that traditional role of sticking it to the man when the man does the wrong thing. So that's
100%.
really important. But what I like about this model is that we protect both. I don't want to
Yes.
see a situation where the business side can say to the advocacy side, "Oh, look, that thing that's going on in Iran, it's not that great, but we don't want you to say anything because it might put us in bad standing with the university." I don't want that to happen. If
No.
it's the right thing to happen, it needs to happen. But by the same token, I don't want the representative side to make decisions that disrupt or destroy the business, because that's where it gets
Yes.
that's where it gets really dangerous when they can have, and you've seen this firsthand, when you make stupid
100%.
purchasing or sales decisions, sell the farm, we'll make millions of dollars, and then we just piss it up for the next 4 years, and then we got nothing and no
That's right.
asset to regenerate the money. We've both seen those models play out unfortunately badly. So that's what's so good about the model, is that it protects the business, but it still adds the layer of representation that works
Yeah.
in this sector. Bit different in
Uh,
sport, but in sport we've just got operators. We've got people who just want to get out and mark lines and blow a whistle. Great, you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
and do that. And so in sport, we're working towards a model that consolidates a lot of that and makes it much more streamlined, so that we've got the people who want to do governance, run the business, but run a bigger business that consolidates a number of campuses of sports fields, and then let the people at each of those facilities just keep your strips, keep your teams, keep your names. Don't worry about governance. That's all taken care of. There's your budget. Go for it. Go and have a great
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I've got one. I'll come back to at the end. I wanted to pick up on about the importance of that, having that separate governance level and training. So remind me in case I forget it. So I do want to circle back to it, but it's for the end, not now. If you could strip away all the legislation and constitutions, what would you say are the three non-negotiable values that every healthy organisation should have at its core?
Look, I'm going to take this one out of the context of student leadership and clubs and just
Yep.
say and the way you asked it was every organization. So
Yep.
any business, any not-for-profit, any charity, any club, any association, I think needs to have three things. And what I'll call them are direction, commitment, and sustainability. So to unpack that a little bit, direction
Yeah.
is
Go on.
purpose. Why do we exist? And it's got to be bigger. From a for-profit perspective, it's got to be bigger than we exist to make money. We exist to provide shareholder
Yeah.
value. That never lasts. And a business that
No,
exists
doesn't
to
work.
make money, well, it does, but it only works until Bernie Madoff goes to jail, or until
Yeah.
Mr. Ponzi, whatever his first name was, goes to jail. Because
Yeah.
you can't do that. Okay, it will work, but it's manipulation as opposed to
Yeah.
inspiration. We don't want to manipulate people. We want to make sure that we've got such clarity of purpose. We are going that way. This is who we serve. This is why. This is how. And this is what the world looks like when we get it right. If you get that bit right, it becomes so easy. Everything else just falls around that. So we've got value statements that fit in there. We've got a definition of our organizational culture that fits in there. But it all stems from having clarity of direction.
Yeah.
And that is why we exist. So that's purpose. Then when you get that, and you look at any fully volunteer run organization, then you get the commitment of people who are so committed to that direction that they work for free. They don't get
Yeah, they're
paid for
coming along.
volunteers. Yeah, and these are people who I know people in sport who do a full-time job at work. So they do their 38 hours a week at work. They're running a family, running a household, and they still find enough time to do 30 or 40 hours a week for their club because they are so committed to the green and white stripes or the maroon
Yes.
shirt. They're so committed to that that they will work for free. And so commitment comes from having clarity of direction. When you get that right,
Yep.
people will then give their time for free. And I think that's critical that we have that in business as well as in not-for-profits. Where we get the split then is the third one. I think that on the business side, they get the sustainability bit really, really well because they know that for us to be sustainable, we need to put fuel in the tank, and fuel in the tank
Yep.
is money. So we don't exist for the purpose of making money. A not-for-profit exists for the purpose stated in the Constitution. A for-profit business exists for the same thing. They just don't have a constitution. And so that's what I'd love to see in every business. And when we do work with for-profit businesses and professional associations, that's where we focus. So we've got to get this bit right. If people were to work for you for free, what sort of impact would you have to have on the planet? And that makes you
Yeah.
go, okay, now I get it. But they on the business side understand we've got to have fuel in the tank, so we've got to have a sustainable business model. We need to still get better at that in not-for-profits across the board. So I think that the student services sector is in a probably a more fortunate position than a lot of sports clubs because
Mhm.
there's, and particular changes to SAF, we've now got SAF as kind of almost an underwriting surety for our organisation.
Yeah.
But how can we then say, okay, well, how could we build this business that in a way that didn't rely on SAF? Wouldn't that be fantastic if we had diverse, and we know people in the sector who do, diverse revenue streams, surety
Yep.
of income, because we're not just selling to the student population, we're also involving our community. And we see this in places like the States when NCAA football teams draw bigger crowds every single freaking week than we do, so say the Cowboys do in North Queensland. Like, and this is
Yeah.
just a university football team. They are so committed and they get it, but there's so much to that business that brings in money and therefore they can afford to build stadia like they do over there. So,
Yeah. It's incredible.
so I absolutely think it's those things. And it's taken me a while to be able, because I don't think it can be more than three, because three go in a beautiful Venn diagram. And when you get it
Yeah.
right, that middle, the
That
rotary
middle
shape
thing,
split in the middle,
success sits in the middle.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it just
Yeah.
glows. That's what we want.
Yeah. Brilliant. Um, So you often talk about reimagining when you're doing your work. Is there a particular thing, like a sacred cow or a tradition or a behavior, a belief that's held onto in the club or tertiary sector that you think time to let that one go?
Yeah, look, I think it's a belief or a misconception that new leaders bring in with them that says everything old has to go. And so there's this reinventing of the wheel. And I see this more so in student associations because of the politicization of a student union more so than a sports
Yeah,
club. And it's kind of like, I was just having a discussion with somebody yesterday about the Queensland government. We're still seeing changes because of the change of government from the red team to the blue team.
that's
Like,
right.
okay, it's been, what is it now? Almost 2 years or so. Yeah,
Yeah, got to be
18
close
months
to
or
that.
something. Yeah, it's 18 months or something since the election. And we're still seeing, oh, well, we can't call that program the same thing because that was the other team. Like, seriously, guys. And I see that in the politicization of student leaders who come in and say, right, we've got to get rid of everything and start again.
That's right. Throw it all out.
And it's so inefficient. So I like to talk about being clear on what are the crown jewels. So if
Yeah,
your student association was a building and it was on fire and you had time to only go in and grab three things, what would those things
yeah,
be? So those things might be, let's call it advocacy. So we're going to
yep,
support our students in academic misconduct claims, providing them, and that would also be where the activism stuff goes as well. So
yep,
we need to protect that. It might be clubs and societies, and it might be food security. So those might be the
Yep.
three things that this organisation does. It says, regardless of what happens this term because of the leaders who've just been elected, these are the things that we must protect. And I think that's really, really important. And I draw the parallel here between a student association and a local council. A
Yep.
local council does a number of things. So council provides me water. So if I
Yep.
don't have water, I will die. So I've got to have clean drinking water in my house. Great, that's really important. Another one might be sanitation. Now, sanitation means taking away my rubbish, my bins every week, and
Yep.
my yellow bin every other week. But it also means taking away my poo and my wee. So it means
Yep.
the sewage system as well. And again, if
Yes.
we get that wrong, if we don't have good sanitation,
die.
people die. And the
Yes.
third one might be the local roads. So I need to be able to get to my home. And underneath those local roads are all of the water and sewage infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that might be the three things that a council does. Now, if there's extra money, then they might have sports clubs and parks and big playgrounds and movies in the park in the school holidays. So we can do these, we can have libraries, we can do all of these other things if there's money, but we've got to get the three things that if we get these wrong, people can't get home or people die. So we've got to get them right. So regardless of who's elected as Lord Mayor, regardless of who's elected as a councillor, we've got to do those things. We can't argue with those. I can come and pitch everything I want about getting more space for rugby union because I'm a big rugby union nut. Yep, but only when these things are taken care of. So we need certainty there. What does that look like in your student association? You got to get that right, because otherwise it can be so easy for particularly political students who don't necessarily understand the business side of continuity to blow it all up. And if we get those wrong, then the university's starting to say, well, why do we even have you? Yes, we've got to give 40% of staff to a student-led independent organisation. It doesn't have to be you. God, we've got to be
100%.
so careful about that.
Yeah. Totally agree with you.
And I think
Totally
that, so the way that we've got
go
to
on.
get that right, I think the way we've got to get that right is to say we've got to have a better handover process. So part of that handover process is obviously the training that we do, but it's also the internal stuff. So in fact, I've got a playbook that we've written that says this is the way a student association should do its handover from term to term or from year to year, depending on how long the terms of office are. So it's really simple. So if anyone wants that, anyone who's listening, just find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And if you're not yet connected with me, connect with me and send me a message and just say handover playbook, and I'll get your copy straight away. Because I've found that that's something that's really simple, but it makes a massive difference. And where are we now?
Absolutely.
April.
And
So
a
people
key
have got that now, they're
responsibility.
planning. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. It's in just throwing my own two cents in. The one I think I'd like to see to be dropped from, like the old ways, is the belief that you always have to be in opposition. Where I see organizations thriving is they argue, they hold the man to account where things are going wrong, but they also recognize there's times to go in and sit down and say, hey, we love what you're doing, how can we work together? That's what I'd like to see. It doesn't have to be a fight. You can fight, and that's what I love about a lot of these new structures. Governance can do the nicey, let's work together, how can we make things better? And your SRC can do that, right? We're not happy, you're not doing enough in this space. So that's, for me, I think, because it was very adversarial historically, but it's not the best way to work. So
No, that's right. And that takes the best of both worlds approach. Yeah.
That's right. It's got to be yin and yang, definitely. Okay, so on to thriving. The ones that you're seeing thriving now, what are their leaders doing differently from the ones who are just treading water? Or are not so much treading water, because I don't think we've got that, but could be thriving more than they are.
Yeah, look, I think that the biggest difference is maybe what they're not doing, and and this is going to sound a bit counterintuitive. The organisations that are doing best have leaders who are not trying to be heroes. When a leader of an organisation tries to be a hero, it becomes less about our constituents and more about me. And we see this in every area that we work. We've got grumpy old farts in golf clubs who have stopped caring about the people who play golf, and they're starting to care more about their big copper pressing on the wall in the clubhouse behind the boardroom table. Like it's not.
Are we
about
talking
you,
about
mate.
Donald Trump? Sorry.
A lot of them think they are.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's that when you're trying to be a hero and you're trying to make it about yourself, you take your eye off the ball, and I think you end up working way too hard. So I remember a leader in one of the sessions that I was running challenged me on that governance and operations thing where I said, we've really got to separate governance and operations. And he sat there and he was very polite in his challenge. And he said, Michael, I would never want to ask one of my team to do something that I wouldn't do. So I always lead from the front. And
Right.
it sounded very noble. And it's hard to argue against that on the surface because you say, well,
Yeah,
actually, that's right. But what that means is that he was always in the weeds. And it only took until the end of that little session that we were doing on the governance and operations separation that he realized that he was actually being really ineffective because he was trying to do everything and trying to lead from the front and set a good example, but it was counterproductive. And so
that's right.
you need to
And
understand a good,
obstructive to the people that you're actually paying to do that job.
and then what's the cost? Then we lose good
Exactly.
people. They go, well, screw
Yeah,
this. I don't have to put up with this. I'm going to get a
yeah,
better job, but people treat me better, and they do. And then they're gone. They're lost to
yeah,
the industry. So it's what, and the way to think about it is not what can I do to be a hero? It's what are the systems that I can help set up so that I leave this place better than I found it? Because the true metric of the strength of somebody as a leader in this sector in particular is not what I've built while I've been here. It's not the programs that I've run, not the things that I've built up, especially if they drop off a cliff the moment I'm gone, because that's not a sign of good leadership. That's a sign of good doership. And we're not
yeah.
after good doers here. We should have plenty of doers, but the doers are the people who want to make a difference, but don't want to commit the sometimes, in some cases, it's a full-time job for student leaders.
Oh,
They don't want to
100%.
commit that. They want to commit only a few hours here and there and feel like they're making a difference. Great. Let's get them involved, give them clear systems, give them clear reporting structures, give them clarity of their role, give them a good induction, where are the toilets, where's the coffee, what time's lunch, like make them comfortable and show them a good time, and they'll be back. But the people who are at the top should be more concerned about what they're leaving behind for others to build upon. So I like to say something like legacy is not what you build, but it's what you leave behind for others to build upon. So the strength, the signs of your leadership strength is in the ability for others to take the organization further than you ever could because you set that foundation. Too many
Yeah.
leaders look at an organization fall off the cliff after they go and say, oh, told you they couldn't do it without me. What's the point of being a hero, mate? Like,
Well,
build
that's right. You
something that
didn't set it up
has
properly
that
if
longevity.
that's what's happened the second you left.
Yep.
Definitely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You almost
Yeah.
and that's very much how I see our role at SEN. If we're doing our job well, people don't necessarily need to know about us. Students should never know about us. What we're there is to support, just lift everyone up. So yeah, I 100% agree with that, definitely.
Yep.
So last one before my additional. When you look back at a project or partnership, what's the one indicator that says to you, we've made a real difference here? Outside of, yeah, they're financially stable and, they meet audit and they can report to the ACNC.
Yeah, put all that stuff aside because everybody should be doing that as a
That's
ticket to
just
the ball.
compliance.
Yeah, that's for me. So looking specifically at the work we do, it's people meeting their duty of diligence. Now that sounds like a wanky answer, but let me explain it in clear terms that fit in this sector. I finished school at 17. So this was because I'm a child of the OP era, not the 8A era or the T era before it. So I finished school at 17 and I'm a November baby. So I was 17 for my whole first year of university. So I'm just gobsmacked and just wide-eyed at
Where
this.
did you go?
And I went UQ. So at
UQ,
St. Lucia.
Yeah, great.
Big campus, like sandstone, the all of the history and the money. And I'm going, wow, this is mind-boggling. Now, as a music student, I had to do some non-music subjects. I guess they figure that musicians are not well-rounded humans, and they'd be right. So they said, go out and we got a big university, go and do 20 credit points a year for your first and second years of non-music subjects. So I went, all right, how can I game the system here? True entrepreneurial brain that I've got. And I went, here's a subject that's 13 credit points, one semester, 13 credit points, CH110, chemistry. Now, I'd never done chemistry. Space nerd, of course, I love my physics. I always did physics at school, loved it. But let me do something different. And it's 13 credit points. I can get 13 credit points out of 20. Then I'll be able to coast through semester 2 and just play more guitar. Yeah. So I took on chemistry thinking, how hard can it be? Well, the answer is
very, very hard.
Oh, So I'm in this lecture theatre. There's me and I'm going to say 350 other bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 17-year-olds and maybe some a bit older. And I'm listening. Now, I've never done chemistry, but I'm looking around at these 350 other faces in the room all gone. And I'm thinking, oh, that must be what mine looked like. And it was just like, oh my God, what's going on? And I'm writing as fast as I can. And I'm not getting spoon-fed like I was in school. So I got to the end of a 2-hour lecture, no break. Old mate down, it's such a big lecture theatre. There's this tiny little dude down the front with his
Yeah,
overhead
yeah.
transparencies that he's washed and stood on, so they're all
Gotta love that
crumpled.
old school tech.
Oh, yeah. And he gets to the end and he goes, right, does anyone have any questions? And I'm thinking, damn straight I got questions. I got a head full of questions. Like, where do I start? And I went to raise my hand and I thought, hang on a minute. If it's only me that has a question, it means that everyone else got it and I'm the only dumb one. And do I really want to sit here and embarrass myself in a room of 350 people to say,
right.
Michael, you're the only dumbass in the room? So I sat on my hands and I looked around. I'm waiting for somebody else to put their hands up. But guess what was going through their heads? I don't
That's
want
right.
to be the only
Exactly the
dumb
same
one.
thing.
Exactly the same. So in the student sector, we have this as a mindset. People think I can't ask questions because it's a sign of weakness. So one of the things, the most important thing that I get across in our training, and it's day one, session one out of the ordinary, you have to ask questions. Now, when we did the online board training for SEN a few years ago, when we redid that, when we did some interviews with a lot of people in the sector, that was the one thing that kept coming up. Student leaders don't ask enough questions. So the 2 words on the board, they stay there for 2 days, ask questions. Now, that's the duty of diligence. You actually legally are required to ask enough questions so that you have enough information to be able to stand hand on heart and say, yes, I have all of the information that I need to make a decision here and say yes or no to this motion.
Yeah.
Ask questions. So it's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of strength. So the indicator for me is a week, a month, 6 months, 8 months after our out of the ordinary training, somebody rings me or one of my team and says, hey, this is the situation that's going on. This is what I think we need to do. And these are maybe the duties that are at risk here. And this is the process that we need to go through. But I just want to make sure we're on the right track. And for me, that's the win. It doesn't matter what I say. And I'll say 99 times out of 100, the thing that they say they were going to do, the action they were going to do, is 100% right. It's absolutely the right thing to do, but they're still checking. They're still meeting their duty of diligence. So it's meant that that's sunk in. And it's more than meeting your duty of diligence. It's going back and not being 17-year-old Michael, because I tell that story and the one about being in the music studio and not asking about compression. And I still don't know how a compressor affects an audio signal because I share those stories because I don't want other people to suffer from them. And I want people to understand that asking a question is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. It makes you right.
Makes you stand out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Okay, last question, and it's very current for me. We are currently acting as returning officer at the newly merged Adelaide University Student Association. And one thing that struck me about this, because there's obviously 2 elections going to be happening there this year. The first one now that we're working on is the board. So there's 10 elected student directors. And then later in the year, they'll do the SRC. What would be your advice be to members to ensure that when people go to an election, they understand what they're getting into?
As in the candidates going for election.
That's right. We had 62 candidates nominate for 10 roles as directors. And it's clear to me that some people don't want director roles or don't understand that what they're running for is a director role, just based on their candidate statements.
Yeah, look, this goes back to the question about the representative structure. When you've got a structure like Adelaide Uni is now developing with a board and an SRC, I think it's providing clarity to those candidates, exactly as you say, what is the role that you want? Because some of them will say, I want a leadership role, so I'll get onto the board, not realizing that the job of the board is to run the business. The job of the SRC, which in this case is a separate organisation, is to do all of that representative stuff that they probably want to do. It's to get their hands dirty like they probably want to do. So it's providing clarity to them about the differences in the roles and trying to put square pegs in square holes.
Yeah.
I would love to get to a point where there's a mandatory pre-election module. So they need to do some training. So we've developed that. It's part of the online course. There's a standalone
Yeah.
30, 40, 60-minute training course that you need to, that I would love for people to need to do to be eligible to stand for election. And it's not because I want to sit there and rap people over the knuckles about what governance is, but it's so that they understand the seriousness of the
That's
role and the
100%.
differences in the roles and what does a leadership role do and look like compared to a management role. Because some of those 62 candidates might actually be better off applying for a casual role as a
Well,
volunteer,
yeah, a lot of them are activists.
casual. Yeah. So get into activism. The
Yes.
board does a little bit of activism, but it's not its job. Its job is to keep the business sustainable, to set the
That's right.
direction, build connection to that, so that people are actually inspired by it and have make sure we've got the sustainability of the whole model.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Okay. Well, listen, it's been fabulous, Michael. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Hopefully our listeners get a lot out of it as well. Your information's on our website. People know where your website is if they want to get in touch about anything that we've discussed today. Thanks, millions. Please do share me. I want pictures of your guitar collection because I love good guitars, and Gibsons are my favorite. So please do share that. The correct answer was Randy Rhoads, which is which
yeah.
that's one for Dan. Dan likes to hear what the correct answer is when I ask these questions.
Crazy Train, the solo from
Yeah,
I would never ever set a guitar tone like he did on that track. But if it was anything different, it would not work. It
would not have worked.
It is
No,
just
it's
brilliant.
that's right. But listen, you mentioned so many great guitarists. I think great guitarists are probably like your favorite film. It's about the music you listen to, the mood you're in. So there isn't a right answer, but you've got to have someone you love the most. So listen, thanks very much for your time today, Michael. Thanks for listening today, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again on the next edition of SEN Insights.